So if you're a subscriber to my channel or if you've watched most of my videos, chances are you are pretty high in openness. So if you find this information useful, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe button, and the bell for notifications. This is part 3 of a 5-part series on the Big 5 personality traits. Now, as a refresher, these Big 5 personality traits are a scientifically tried and true way to map out personalities of people in real life. And when you're creating a character, you want to try to make them as close to real life and as relatable as possible for your readers. What I do as a writer is I use these Big 5 personalities and I create a character focusing on each of the various personality traits. Once I have that in mind, I can generally put my character in certain situations and already know what kind of decisions they would make if they were presented to them. Now keep in mind that with the Big 5 personalities, all of these traits are on a spectrum, and many people can move across the spectrum due to different situations or to develop your character arcs throughout the story. So somebody that might start out low on agreeableness, that gets a little gumption behind them, will end up being a little bit more disagreeable as time progresses. For more information on the Big 5 personalities as a whole, be sure to check out my first video, which is on conscientiousness. Now, when I say that most of these personality traits can be moved across the spectrum as character arcs develop, unfortunately, openness is one of those things that sort of stays stagnant, and that is because openness is often related directly with IQ. So a person high in openness is generally very creative, which means they can take abstract thoughts from different areas, put them all together, and create something new. It takes somebody that's rather intelligent in order to be able to do that. They're also very interested in new ideas and different things. Now IQ, although there's a lot of controversy surrounding IQ, it is something that has been measured pretty frequently throughout multiple cultures with taking into consideration multiple variables and ruling those things out. And unfortunately, while you can make IQ lower, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to raise it. And so an open-minded person, generally they are or they aren't. My son is awake. So what is the opposite of an open-minded person? That would be a closed-minded person, if you hadn't already guessed. So a closed-minded person is less interested in new ideas. They more like routine and things to be the same. It's mainly that they don't have that spark of creativity, so when changes happen, they are not able to adapt to them as well. Now, it sounds like I am dissing closed-minded people, but that's not necessarily the case, because with a highly open-minded person, there are some other problems that do come along with this, which we're going to talk about later on in the video. Some of the more obvious things are related to a closed-minded person. For example, if somebody does not have a very high IQ, they can really find life to be a bit of a struggle for them. But it's not all rainbows and butterflies for a highly open person either. So stay tuned for the rest of the video, and we're going to talk about that as well. Whenever I talk about these two categories, I automatically get an image of somebody in mind. I think often of like the 9-to-5 factory worker who's a fantastic provider for their family, who comes home every night and is a fantastic father, bringing in resources, but things kind of generally stay the same throughout their life. And they're okay with that. They like that. That's how they want their life to be. And then there's the other side of the spectrum where you have your people like Elon Musk, who are constantly doing something different, who are into all sorts of ideas, and they're not always in the same category, even relevant to each other. Now, when I reference that factory worker above, I know automatically I have viewers that are saying, but what about this person? What about this person? What about this person that breaks out of the rut of their life and experiences life for the first time? And so I'm going to take the movie The Secret Life of Walter Mitty to talk about this for a minute. For those that have not seen this video, I'm going to talk about a few spoilers here, so you might want to skip ahead just a little bit. When it came out, I didn't really pay much mind, but I saw it later on, and I actually really liked it. But basically, the gist of the story is Walter Mitty has a job. It's very meticulous, kind of in the basement kind of job. Every day is pretty much the same, although he has these daydreams about this life he could be living, these imaginary conversations he could be having, this incredible life that he could have had when he was younger. A disaster strikes at his job, and he's sent on a quest to fix his job. And he ends up doing all these things he once imagined himself doing and living the life of his dreams. I would argue that that's not talking about his open-mindedness, because as we can see, Walter Mitty already was having all sorts of imaginations about the life that he wishes that he could be living. He's interested in different ideas, but it's the level of conscientiousness that he has in him, the industriousness, striving forward, trying to make money and be a responsible adult kind of thing that is where the change is occurring. So his open-mindedness rather stays the same throughout this movie. It's more related to the conscientiousness factor. Now, you're more than welcome to disagree with me on this, and be sure, if you do disagree, comment below. We might have a fun little discussion about that. But that is my opinion about where that character arc is going, rather than it coming from the openness part of the character. Now, I do have a story in mind that talks about openness and a character arc in that way, and that would be Flowers for Algernon. So if you've not read Flowers for Algernon. I believe there's a film about it too. You might want to skip ahead if you want to actually read it. Basically, the gist of the story is you have a gentleman who has a very low IQ. Every day is pretty much a struggle. He has no real interest in new ideas. He just struggles to get by. The scientists come up with this way of increasing his IQ. And he's thrust into this world of all sorts of new ideas and all sorts of new theories, and he's loving it. He's eating it up. So this does occur to be a change in openness, where the IQ goes up and the creativity level goes up, and this gentleman is faced with a brand new life ahead of him. And that is where you find your story arc. But keep in mind, it's like a magic system. Something magical happened to him, and a scientific thing occurred to him that increased his IQ. It's not something that through hard work and striving that he increased his level of creativity. And once again, I mentioned that a change in openness can occur in your characters, but generally it's not in towards more openness. It's generally towards the other direction. Say your character's in a very bad car accident and incurs a mental injury, or your character has a diagnosis of Alzheimer's and is slowly losing their ability to function and their ability to communicate in the world. But raising it, that's why Flowers of Algernon is such an interesting book. And I can already imagine the comment zone going, well, what about the story where this guy is very racist and he believes certain stereotypes about certain people, but then he's exposed to a culture and becomes more open-minded? Well, the interesting thing about the medical world and the scientific world and layman's terms is they don't always mean the same thing. If I was talking to somebody on the street, I would agree that yes, this person is probably less open-minded or they're more closed-minded, but really it's not really what this is talking about. I would say that this person has another conscientious problem in that they believe that everything should fit into a certain box or things should be a certain way as it relates to orderliness, like certain races shouldn't marry certain races or certain things should be done. There needs to be walls between different things, and there's a change in the conscientiousness where they need to lighten up a little bit on their orderliness. But I don't believe that it's necessarily related to creativity or openness. Now, when I started this video, I told you we talk a little bit about some of the pros and the cons as it relates to openness. So what are some of the cons related to openness? Say you've got this fantastic idea for a novel, and since I'm speaking mostly to novelists, I'm going to run with this theory. It's not really sci-fi, it's not really paranormal, it's not a hero's journey, it's something in between, something through all of those things. Well, your publisher might have a little trouble picking up your novel because it is so many things and they don't have a great spot to put it on the bookshelf. The author is sort of passed over because they don't know how to sell this thing. It's too creative, if you will. Many creatives lie in a place of anonymity surrounded by all their fantastic ideas because people don't know what to do with them. So there's also a mental illness associated with trait openness, and that is bipolar disorder. And that is often because when a person is in a manic state, they become very fluid with their ideas. They write these fantastic sonnets, paint these fantastic paintings, or they create this fantastic song or this symphony or a fantastic novel. And then it's almost like their whole creative nature it's been so much energy that it kind of collapses within itself. Ever heard of the tortured artist? Well, it is a thing, and it's related to this trait openness. So being creative and having a high IQ does track well for success, which makes sense because if a person is very fluid and able to adapt to different changes, it will work better for them in the workplace. But it does come at a price. So tell me about your characters in the comments below, because I'd like to hear about your stories and your different people. And I do read all my comments and I do reply back to them. So I'd love to hear from you. When I created my character Jared, and I talk about Jared a lot because he's my main character. He's a child genius, essentially. He's 17 years old and he's already a genius level. He's very, very high in openness. Jared is a slave, which means while his captors do use his openness and his high creativity to their benefit often, it does make him a threat because he's always thinking of ways of escaping and doing things behind their back. They can't trust him. So in a normal society, Jared would thrive and do well in the workplace, but in this society is not much of a boon to him. If he could just keep his head down, he'd actually be a lot better off. So now that we've covered 3 of the 5 personality traits, you can probably have a good view of my character, Jared. He's very intelligent, so he's high in openness. He's very conscientious, but also disagreeable. Now take that character and put him in a different setting. So he's a slave in my story. Throw him into a hospital. Dr. House, anybody? Throw him into a Fortune 500 company. CEO? So you can kind of see where this goes. While the backstories are very different, in which really creates a different essence to your character, you can take these people and you plug them in different stories and you kind of already have a view of who that character is going to be. I hope you've enjoyed this videos and find this information useful. If you do, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe button, bell for notification. I'm getting faster and faster at that. I really don't like to advertise like that, but the experts say you need to do it, so whatever. I do have a new novel coming out. I'm hoping to have more information about that in the near future, so be sure to stay tuned.